Hello, good evening. Welcome to this third edition of Burnout, Unlock the Stress Cycle. Last week we described what burnout is, and tonight we'll try to find out why does it happen? What are those environmental factors, and how can we strategize and come up with ways to make it manageable and to succeed in our wellness goals. So my name is Ian, and I look forward to improving our awareness to mental health and being a part of this conversation tonight with Stacey Ivitz. And I'll just hand it quickly to my wife, Lauren, here.
Hello, good evening. We're also going to mix some movement in with our book and body club tonight to get moving and to have a little fun and feel that you can still find play and joy in movement, small or big.
Yeah, and I'm Stacey Ivitz. I'm a social worker here in Guelph, and I'm excited to discuss this more with Ian and Lauren and do some of the movements along with everyone at home. And hopefully it's a really good discussion together, talking a bit about kind of the things that get in the way of doing the wellness activities just in general.
Mm-hmm. To start tonight, we wanted to start with our breath, calm down, have a little focus, and then we'll get into some business. So however you like to sit or stand, I'm just going to sit on the edge of my chair so my feet can reach the floor and I can sit up tall, placing one hand on the belly and one hand on the chest. From here, breathing in and out your nose for a couple breaths, just finding your nice pace and feeling which hand is moving right away. Are you already breathing into the belly? It's expanding. Or are you finding some shallower breaths into your chest? I want us next to breathe into our belly. For here, we're going to come to a 4-second inhale to the belly now. 4, 3, 2, 1, and then a controlled exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Back into the belly for 4. And then I just want you to hold that belly breath for 4, 3, 2, and exhale for 4. In again to the belly for 4. All the way around. Hold that breath for 4. And now let's take a breath into the chest for 4, 3, 2, 1, and then an exhale for 4, 3, 2. We're going to do one more round. Belly for 4. Hold that breath for 4. Into the chest, expanding the ribcage in all directions. 3, 2, now let's hold full for 4. And then a nice controlled 4-second exhale. And relax. Now we're focused.
Yeah.
We're breathing nicely. How'd that feel?
I love those breathing exercises. The difference between breathing and respiration, right? We can breathe to check in, and the respiration is a little bit more fight or flight a little bit, where if we can, check in with the breath, we can often kind of regulate a little bit and slow things down.
Yeah, and the breath is something we all have with us all the time. So
Travels well.
it does travel well
does.
for strategies. It's always there. So just noticing it, working with it.
Yes, and
challenge.
yeah, that's an interesting word, working with it, but then also challenging it, exactly. So when it does get a little tense or a little bit out of control, being able to slow it down, pull it back in, and find something to focus on.
Yeah, and you surprised me with going from belly breath to chest and extra.
Did you take 4 seconds?
I was just like, oh, what are we doing? Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to do both.
Spaces.
I like to think of myself as a tree because it's strong, but trees always breathe. So being able to breathe and hold strength.
I like that
Interesting.
analogy. Yeah, that's lovely.
If we could just continue one more time with a little body weight movement here. We said that this book has discussed unlocking that stress cycle. And again, sometimes our bodies can get locked in a certain position and they need some education perhaps on how to get out of that as well. So we'll continue our exploration. We've done a roller coaster style at the head, neck, and the chest and a body wave like this. And now we're going to go a little bit on that merry-go-round and draw a circle with that head, neck, and then the rib cage around the hips. So stay seated. Oops, there you go. Stay seated. I'm just going to come up just a little bit here.
You stay seated too. I'm going to come up and stand.
Okay. So that side profile is very helpful too. So pull the chin in a little bit and the crown high. From here, slowly press your face forward to the text neck but then return the chin in, retracting to tall. Then from here, slide your ear towards the left. That is a tricky one. The front angle might be more helpful for that, and return to center. Then from there, slide the ear to the other side. Return center. From here, let's slide to a side of your choice. I'll choose the right. And then from the right, we'll go counterclockwise as we circle the head neck forward. Then bring it around. We've done a half circle at this point. The back half of that circle becomes much smaller as we continue to pull the chin in, returning the ear to the original side, and then return to center to reset. One time the other direction. Ear, shift, so the head is moving, the neck is moving a little, but the head is moving first. And then around that circle, reaching clockwise this time, to the front, and then to the side. It might taper or get shallow like an oval out the back as you return a circle shape to the original lateral side and return center. Let's repeat that same exercise through our rib cage or the T-spine section of our body. I like my hands across my chest, and I can feel the work that's required on those abdominals to engage this movement. Let's set up lateral shift first. If you're having a tough time with those circle shapes, connecting them, just for now, go lateral like we did, and then lateral the other way. If you're ready to join the circle, one time each way. I'll shift to the left. From there, we'll reach forward, pushing the sternum or the heart forward, returning to the side lateral. Then pulling around the back, again, a shallow taper or oval shape is most likely, returning lateral, and then center. Once in the other direction. I'll slide to the right. I'll reach counterclockwise to center forward. Then from there, go to the side, and then move around the back, returning to that original side, and then center. And shake. Those movements, again, travel very well. Just have our own body. And again, if we've been stuck at the computer or in any other profession or recreational pursuit in a certain position, reset and unlock that way to bring back to center.
Yeah, I was thinking after my kids ride their bikes, because they've been on their bikes constantly this week, which is great. But they kind of get really hunched over after a while. So that getting them to kind of just roll it out a bit.
And they double as good dance moves later on. So educate the brain.
Yeah.
Just showing those moves off for you there.
Just shaking it.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Well, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Kind of settles in.
I know, yeah.
It's a nice way to kind of start off, can be a heavy topic, but we're going to try and keep it light tonight. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that it isn't a light topic. It's deep, but we don't have enough time to get all the way into it. It's a couple chapters in the book. And if any of this intrigues you or you have questions, really going back to the book and then going to some of the resources they cite is going to answer a lot of your questions. And emailing us, we're always happy to kind of
chat.
Yeah. Or asking in the discussion. That's great too. Yeah. So we're kind of looking at what gets in the way of completing the stress response. How does certain patterns of life or expectations kind of interrupt that flow? Yeah. So we could kind of just chat about that a little bit. So in the book, they talk about the isms that kind of get in the way. And they talk about the patriarchy and an empowering, they always write, so the patriarchy, because it is such a heavy thing. And it's like, and I like that they aren't blaming anyone, not the people on any side. Like if the patriarchy gets in your way and it doesn't allow you to, feel like you can complete the stress cycle, it's not your fault. It happens. There's a system. And if you benefit at all from the patriarchy, it's not your fault either. It kind of existed before all of us. So just a kind of acknowledging that and how it contributes to some other isms that happen in our world. And
getting to that point about not being a blame game, the authors discuss that it's a no-win game scenario
for
in
anyone.
this sense for anyone, and that is independent of race, class, gender, any of those variables that we always like to highlight for sure. But again, it has to do with that systemic reasons that these are happening. And again, we can identify ways that we've benefited certainly from that system that has been in place, whether it's the capitalist kind of view on that, or again, just that the male dominated aspect of things, as I hog the mic here. But yeah, so again, just that you're not going to win, but it isn't about winning. It's about reframing and all those other strategies that are more controlled by you versus approaching such a massive conglomerate that might not change in our lifetime. And then the authors say it probably won't. And there's always going to be a discrepancy, whether it's a poverty thing or any of those race, gender biases. But it's our job as individuals, and then as our conversation continues, to just reframe that and make it a little bit more approachable and set yourselves up for success instead of those self-perceived failures.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I like about how the authors write about this big topic is that separating out the stressors and the stress cycle. And we've talked about that last week, and how the stress cycle, you can address your stress and kind of meet it where you're at without kind of dealing with the stressor. And so these chapters are kind of about looking at some of these big stressors, and then there's other ones that may or may not be in your control as well, that like the pandemic. But that dealing with our personal experience can be kind of revolutionary by taking care of ourselves, right? So,
I need simple ways to take care of ourselves too,
yes.
that are long lasting.
Sustainable.
The sustainable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Breathe.
For our bodies when we're hungry, overlooked as a way of taking care of ourselves, I think, in the work I do. And then also moving maybe without a goal. So we were talking a bit about the playfulness side of it, that playfulness, that doing it without a specific end goal, that can be revolutionary. We're kind of taught like, hey, if you're not going for that, half marathon or the marathon or the thing, why are you running? Well, maybe you're running because it really helps your mental health. It just feels good. It's a nice break. It gets you out into the countryside, whatever it is. And how that in itself can be really challenging the status quo and the expectations.
And finding ways that are fun. And if that to you is joining the Ultimate Frisbee team, great. Doing the run. But also forcing yourself a little bit to find ways to move, walking to work, going for a walk at lunchtime, just simple things that, again, they just ultimately lead to a little bit betterness, which is totally a word, versus betterment, thank you.
Or even just nourishment.
Right.
I like that word a lot. I use it a lot with my clients. So any of them who are watching, they'll know I use that, like, you nourish yourself, but body, mind, and spirit.
Somebody was recently talking to us about the adrenaline rush they feel after a hard workout. And we were like,
thinking about adrenaline.
Is that good? Is that bad? Do I feel that? Like when I come in for my little runs, do I feel, and I actually feel like,
So it's more serotonin.
Yeah, it's more relaxing. And that cup of coffee, I always do this in the mornings, that cup of coffee after tastes like even better, right? But just what are our goals in some sense of exercise, but also just to do something.
Do it.
Yeah,
and I really like that they use that phrase, do something, as a way, do a thing. As a way to kind of cope with stress and with burnout. So this idea that it is really overwhelming, some of the problems we're facing in our world, and we can kind of get stuck under it. And we can, in burnout, that's really what it does feel like, is you're kind of stuck under it. There's nothing I can do. It's all overwhelming. Just do a thing.
Lauren encouraged me to do a thing today. I was in the back trying to figure out how to troubleshoot some FaceTime issues that I'm having with some clients I'm training online. And I want to have a streamlined process. I want it to be predictable for the client and for me. So I was in the back, all the Google searches in the world, could not help. Spent about 45 minutes to an hour trying to figure it out. And Lauren peeked around the corner and said, go do a thing, like go for a walk. Just go for a walk, mix up your scenario, mix up the appreciation for the rainy day, the sunny day, whatever it is outside. Just get out of that a little bit with the movement, come back. And I had come to terms, like I did what I could do. I'm not going to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
And then it ended up turning out okay. So again,
Yeah.
that's not exactly predictable, and it doesn't always have to turn out a-okay, but that you did a thing because you're in that moment. I was very much in that stuck place, getting frustrated, calling myself 20 times on each account, right? So that doesn't get me anywhere.
No.
Mix it up, and then we can reframe how that is really important to us for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
The run comment you said also was just really pertinent to Lauren. I would like Lauren to maybe expand on her running. I always ask, why do you run? And she never says for fitness. She never says for exercise.
Right.
If you want to explain, you can.
It's a really hard question because I can't explain. I like the motion.
Yeah.
I like the physical motion.
Yeah.
I like being alone a little bit. I don't really think about much else.
So it's maybe your mindful awareness, kind of your time.
I'm not saying it's easy, but I don't think about other things. Some days are harder than others. And I'll go, it's never really for a race. And often I'll start my run by, I'm just going to go out for a kilometer. If I do that, I'll feel good. And oftentimes it ends up being a couple more. But just the other day I went out, just do 3K. And I did that and it felt good. And it wasn't, I should have done 17. It was just, that's what I needed.
Today.
15 minutes, boom, bang, done.
Cool.
I don't know if that really explains why I like running,
It's
but
what you feel about running, so it's important.
I think it's really important to kind of see what each of us kind of gravitate towards. So when I'm working with clients, for them, it might not be like an exercise type thing. It could be knitting. I think I might have talked about it last time, and that's really helpful. And it's where they find their peace and their creativity. And when they miss it, they really miss it once they've started doing it every day. And I think that's the other piece they talk about in the book is finding an activity that is your reset button that you do every day. Whether it feels like you're super stressed out or if you're just a like ho-hum day, hey, whatever. But acknowledging that in our day-to-day, there are stresses and they build up and they accumulate if we don't address them.
and that's interesting because I think a lot of the people we see, clientele, don't really like exercise either. Exercise as defined by fitness, let's say.
Right.
Right? And so we're trying to find a way to show them you can move your body and feel better and probably maybe not even break a sweat, which is totally fine, and explore and play and move in a different way and try to have a little bit of fun and find some sort of enjoyment in it
Yeah.
once a week. Start there, 20 minutes, 10 minutes. But then it was interesting. Can I talk about that you were here today? Stacey was
Sure.
here today with her kids playing, so fun.
Yeah.
And I just commented one of the moves we were practicing was just a row, basic row. I said, wow, you've gotten so much better. Have you been practicing? Oh, a couple times. It's like, that's all we need is you to do that a couple times
Once or
or
twice on your
just think about it. Even just the brain connection to the body is so important. And sometimes we think we just need something so extreme.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't practice that. I maybe did it twice since the last time we
but
were
that's
here.
like more than not.
That's more than not. That is more than not.
200%.
And I came in and I said, like, one of the issues that's really weak for me is my shoulders. So this like lat pull is really, actually really important for my pain levels and stuff like that. But I also don't want to do it wrong. So that's something I get into is like, so I like being here and being guided and like knowing that I have the right form and that I'm working the right spots because then I don't hurt afterwards. And I didn't hurt afterwards the couple times I did it at home.
Good.
But just really kind of paying attention and not overdoing it is my thing.
And not overdoing exactly that. Sometimes you send people home with a little bit of homework and they come back and they're like, I did it 700 times.
There's no play there.
There's no play. Great effort, but let's dial it back to 5, what you think is good times, and listen to what your body says.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So really, I think you just hit on something that's really important about what they discuss in these part 2, chapters 4 and 5 is the listening to the body that has been interrupted by these kind of, I'm going to use the term, it's like systems of oppression, and they discuss it more in the book, and it's all the isms we know about. And maybe you don't, and you can learn more about it, but we aren't going to talk about it exactly right here because it's long. It's important and it's long, and read the book. It's great. They really explain it well. but they get in the way of us listening to our body, completing our stress cycles, setting boundaries. We were discussing that a little bit too, like how, as business owners, sometimes when we set boundaries, then clients aren't loving it. And we do want to meet them where they're at. We do want to like accommodate and make it an enjoyable thing. But we also have to kind of, well, I don't work on Tuesdays. I don't work on Tuesdays. And everyone has to have their own boundaries around when they work and for how long or how many clients they'll see. And it's important. And we can teach that to clients by kind of modeling it as well. So.
And that's the catch-22 we find ourselves in all the time. People approach us for the life-work balance as a catchphrase again.
Yeah.
But ourselves currently, it's a skill that we're working on. We're not adapted to these current times. We're not adapted to the new ways of doing business, but we're continuing to try to niche out those spaces throughout the day or the week that are unique to us, where we, again, get to take care of ourselves instead of advocating all the time that you take care of yourself, because that's super important too. But we do need to, be selfish a little bit in that regard of picking your spots to have a day off.
Right. Or a week off. Did I tell you guys?
Ooh.
I haven't taken a week off in a long time. Did I mention that?
Oh my
No,
goodness.
but I'm nodding because I know the
Yeah,
feeling.
we talked about that earlier. Continue, sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, no. I realized the other day I haven't taken a week off in 15 months, like a whole week. It was by accident. I advocate for vacation and holiday time, and I do take care of myself. And I've also noticed that I'm not super burnt out. Like I would say no more than anyone else. Given everything.
The new normal.
And actually, like we're doing okay as a family, and I'm healthy, and yeah, but I actually haven't taken a full week off in like 15 months, and that's something I'm working. I'm like, got to carve that out. That's going to be important, actually.
Interestingly, on our way up to work this afternoon for our second round, I said, Lauren, when is the last day we had off? We've had Mondays off as our day to take away from the studio, but even just as recent as Monday, it was on the computer until 11:30.
Doing stuff.
Hey, it's lunch. We're not working after lunch. So that's a huge win for us that we were able to shut it down to half day. Little pieces.
Yeah.
But then getting back to that original conversation on the way up, when was the last day we had off? And we took January the 4th off. We drove up to the cottage to visit parents and came home the next day. And then we were back to filming and back to our life here, which we very much enjoy.
Yes.
But when you are able to actually check in with yourself and ask yourself, we need a break.
Yeah.
And it's not a position of weakness to say that from. It's just that self-realization.
Oh.
Wow, that's been some time. We've been through some stuff, and taking that time to do whatever you want. And we probably will still work out on those days we take off,
Sure.
and that's okay because we enjoy it. But it's the break of the routine, the expectation to perform, to be here, to be present, which we love again. But
And also, what does that look
adds
like
up.
as a boundary? Like,
Right.
and what does it mean? And how does that model for the folks that you work with, but also just in your community? Like, hey, this is important.
I think one of the biggest things a lot of people are facing now too is not just small business owners a little bit, but everyone is that in this time of COVID, a time off is like either non-existent because your kids are home. I mean, they're great that they're home.
My kids.
Yeah.
Great, but they're so busy.
But yeah. And then, or that these lockdowns have been time off. And it's like,
Right.
they haven't really been time off. Let's just be clear there. They've been time of progression and time of change and time of learning, time of stress. And so I think a lot of people are facing this. I was talking to somebody else in a different industry and somebody came up and said, well, I'd really like a week off. It's like, well, we just had a lockdown. Yeah, but the entire time I was thinking about work and stressed about this and trying to make money other ways and da-da-da-da-da. So realizing that it is okay to take a week. And that
to have a staycation, it doesn't need to.
We're not going to go anywhere.
Excursion.
It's just going to be.
It was different.
Yeah.
Some difference.
Yeah. So I'm planning to take a week off, but I'm still doing training.
Like education.
I just know exactly.
Working out with us.
Both, but yeah.
I just know exactly how this happens. So it's funny.
Yeah. So, it's baby steps. So it's like,
That's what it is.
it's baby steps. It's
You
like,
can't swing too hard, right?
Yeah.
We recognize that pendulum is there in all regards. We can't swing too hard because it won't stick.
right.
Slow change is maybe more likely to stick.
And
Yeah.
sometimes a vacation feels like if it's just a little change. So all you have to do that week is training. That's pretty exciting. You don't have to meet clients on top of training, or you don't have to
Right.
do those extra things. So sometimes that is,
It's a breather.
yeah.
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 Going back to our breath and how that kind of helps us reset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love seeing clients. So it's like,
I know.
We get
yeah,
energy from that too, right? So we recognize.
working with people. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
need a break.
So yeah, figuring that out, I think kind of ties into what these chapters are about, and kind of setting those boundaries that it's not all about what we produce or what we achieve. It's about how we feel, and checking in. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think yeah. Is there I made notes. I make notes most weeks. We kind of go off the notes sometimes more than others. The one chapter that I found really interesting based on my work is that chapter 5, the bikini industrial complex. So we might spend a few moments on that, if that's, and how that ties into the work we do and movement and mental health. And
Yes.
Yeah?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. This chapter really excites me. One of the things that I just found really interesting in the chapter was, I think it was Fiji, didn't have cable TV, something, don't quote me on
Yeah.
how that is,
Pop culture.
1994 or prior. And they had the lowest rate of eating disorders, if any.
They didn't have any
Identified, right. So are they looking for it, all that stuff? But then in
then
1995,
They got TV.
they got TV.
And they got like magazines that go with TV, and they got a whole bunch of pop culture. And I guess, North American ideals around body shape, size, and all of that. And then they got one of the highest levels of eating disorders in like 3 years.
Yeah.
And it's pretty serious, because eating disorders have one of the highest mortality rates of all it is the highest mortality rate of all mental illness. And so it's really important to kind of pay attention to that. Like, how does the idea of what one's body is supposed to look like impact how we treat our bodies, how we listen to things like our hunger cues and satiety cues, and what we do when we're, say, working out or moving.
We really like the basics as well as the classics. And with the classics comes a different type of body image, right? Women back in the day, long ago, who did they want to sculpt and paint? They wanted to sculpt and paint women that had curves, women that showed fertility, I guess, and ultimately in a lot of cases.
Times, yeah.
And how that's changed so much to be the opposite.
Well, and I think it's just even cool to look at it as like, oh, this idea of what a healthy body is a construct. And so they spend some time examining that, and like, where is the health part of it? And realizing that one of the tools that's often used in, can I say the fitness industry?
Oh yeah, we don't like to be in that industry. Yeah.
In the fitness industry is like BMI, and how to change your body to fit into these predetermined like standards. But how that can be really unhelpful and isn't actually like based in science. And I really love that they spend some time going over the science and the statistics and everything, and the research we do have.
One more thing before you talk. I did want to acknowledge too as well, it wasn't just women they talked about, but they did mention in the book about like chiseled ab and giant men.
Yeah.
Right. And how as much as women are facing that, there is that constant pressure to be either your dad bod or you're ripped. Right? Like there's no
just who you are.
Just who you are.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing. I mean, if you do think back to the classics, then as I go back to that, most of those sculptures are chiseled individuals.
They are. But what's that also saying about culture at that time too? And there's a whole bunch of discussions that could be had around that. So, but it's just knowing that it's a construct, this idea that this is what's ideal. That's just a construct that kind of gets in the way of taking care of our bodies and exercise and movement that can be so restorative and helpful.
Huge barrier, yeah.
Just regarding the articles, I think it was the athlete book that they cited, and about the researcher for that particular book looked at and examined a gymnast that is an elite gymnast, an elite bowler, an elite speed skater, an elite NBA player, et cetera. And that list goes on across the spectrum there.
All the
men, women,
Olympians, yeah.
all those Olympians, right? And how those BMI measures differed tremendously from each to each. And that gets to something that we try to focus on in the studio here. We try to focus on the form of exercises or the function of your exercise to perhaps start to influence the form of your body. So rather than coming into the studio or approaching your exercise for fitness workout, I need to lose X this, I need to burn this, tone that, all those exercise jargon you really try to stay away from here in the studio.
Yeah.
But don't approach fitness with those. What do you like about a fitness pursuit? And that could be the yoga pursuit, and that could be the bar. And I just know from that experience in the bar, people have seen my body where I was more like a bench press deadlift. And no, it was never big, but it was a different body. And now people can see how I move, and I'm very much influenced by the ballet, and my hips move a certain way. And I'm able to express that movement because I chose the bar.
Because you chose to
focus on the movement, rather the process again, rather than focusing on the product being toned arms. And I might have toned arms because of the bar, but that's just because it happens, because I used it, rather than that being the focus of every workout session to tone my arms. That'll happen. That'll happen if you kind of choose the right passion in the fitness or any recreational pursuit, right? You start to look like a hiker and wear hiking boots if you go for hikes. Yeah. So same thing in a wellness or a fitness context.
Yeah, or even with artists too. If you think about people who they gravitate towards, say, a certain style of painting that they really enjoy, but it will develop from there as they spend more time with it. And you look at their earlier work versus their current work, and you can see such growth and change in what they've created. I think it goes for anything you kind of spend your time pouring energy into, it shows up in different ways. Yeah.
And that was in that we love fitness and not fitness. We like exercise and movement.
Yes.
But that was also interesting in the book, just identifying other creative ways. Writing, you like to write, art, there's something else, knitting. But that you have something else to try, to work on, to improve on, to do, to stick to.
Yeah.
To focus on something.
Yeah.
Something.
Do something.
Do something.
They write that multiple times throughout both chapters of how that can help to counteract this sense of burnout and work. It also isn't just about distracting. And I really make this differentiation when I'm working with clients is it's not just about distracting, though that can be really helpful at different times. It is about choosing where your mind's going and what you're focusing on and growing something and seeing that. But at the same time, in the background, wheels are turning in your brain and you're able to process through things.
One of the interesting things about the knitting, some of the movement we do, even art, depending on how I'm not a very good artist, depending on how you're drawing over here, is that you do cross the body. And so
the bilateral.
Yeah, the midline. So crossing the midline also is an important for problem. I'm not a scientist, but I would assume for problem solving, for improvement on mood, for connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
So trying to find things that do
both sides.
Yeah.
And even bilateral stimulation, like tapping your feet. You also often have your feet or your hands, and that it can be a way to ground yourself in the moment if you're feeling anxious or to work through things. And it ties into one of the training I'm doing is EMDR. So that's why I'm taking some time off to focus on that. Just a week, but but it's really about going from both points of vision. So that your eyes cross over the midline, right?
What is it called again? What does it stand for?
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so it's a way of working through emotions and trauma and things like that. That has a great evidence base, and it's really helpful to folks, especially with the amount of anxiety that's around in the world right now. So.
And I don't know anything about this, but just interesting how much progress and how much information and how much you're going to learn and share about just eye movement.
Yeah, so that's how it started. And now it can be vibrations like tapping in both hands, or it can be like that you tap your own feet to a certain anyhow, there's lots of different ways. It can be sound, it can be, but the point is that it crosses the body so that you're having it on one side and then on the other side. And that you're doing this in a specific focused way. And it's really interesting. But how all of these movements and arts and things like that are tying that in, that the body is moving and integrating.
Right.
So.
And I think too, with this, we find that we underestimate what stress is or what trauma is on our body. And there's the obvious things that you think of.
Yeah.
But just back in January, Ian went to the dentist, like getting a cavity filled. You don't really think about that being stress on your body, but that's a local anesthetic. That's somebody then for an hour, like,
And there's concern around, I imagine, maybe.
A little bit of stress sitting in the chair.
I hope they don't slip.
Right.
Yeah.
And how we do underestimate the toll that I'm not saying he was like bedridden for days, but just underestimate the trauma that does inflict on us.
It's a stressor.
A stressor. And the hormones that were released just in that process.
Right.
That need to be
worked through. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of what we do again in studio is categorized as light-ish, although we do have those heavy moments too. But as Stacey said, the painting and the moving and the knitting, those are very much those lifestyle tasks that we might not do if we are stuck at a workstation for that extended period of time. And we kind of perceive our purpose as this exercisers here to do things that you might not do by yourself, but that doesn't include 300 burpees. You might not want to do 300 burpees by yourself, but try the head neck roll to mobilize. And again, with the introduction of labor and the workstation, and that we don't use our bodies as physical, laborious tasks, most of us, we become disconnected from that. And it's the purpose of our exercise to restore those connections and to bring about those bilateral or unilateral challenges with movement.
Yeah. And I think even those who maybe have a more laborious kind of job, it's also kind of very strenuous. So there isn't the flow necessarily or the recovery time, and how specific movements can help to stretch things that are maybe been overworked, or like there's a role for it in everyone's life, I think, to kind of focus in and kind of work through that stress, however that shows up. I'm a farm. I grew up on a farm. I'm a farm girl. So I know that even for my dad, like he was on his feet all day, but that didn't mean it was great for his back, let's say.
So for someone in that circumstance where they're very active, the restorative approach to exercise with a little bit of the extra stress, because that is fun and can be also applied, but that candidate might need to slow down with that exercise and just be more introspective or checking in versus expending more.
Yeah.
And that kind of gets back to that adrenaline comment that was kind of proposed before. So we've all been in those moments where adrenaline helped us 100%.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? We've been in those stressful scenarios where we had to run real fast or do something that was out of our expectations for the moment, and that adrenaline. But there's also a huge cost to expending all that adrenaline after, I don't know the science behind it either, but again, there's that drop.
The after,
and that is possible with movement, but you might not need to adrenalize yourself to that really high level to achieve that realization that there is that tension and stress, then there is also the opportunity for that relaxation.
And the recovery.
And again, maybe recovering from an adrenal surge is tremendously different than from just recovering with your breath and just bringing some awareness to that.
Yeah.
So again, adrenaline, super helpful in a workout. I'm not sure. It's been thinking about it a lot for sure.
Yeah. And do we have the science? So I always like to look up, like, what do we actually know and what do we still need to learn about things like this? And with neuroscience, we're just starting to understand that's really been unlocked in the last 20 years. And so putting it all together, and that's how we know more about how certain things I use with folks actually work. Before we could see that it helped sometimes, but now we can actually see on like an MRI, like what is it doing and how could that be helpful, and kind of putting it together.
And And with that interesting story in the book about how the sister was so stressed and she had to go to the ER, and the result was stress.
Yeah.
And so how we do use movement to help with the stress, but again, is it more harm than good? So just knowing, like you said, knowing the difference between I need to put out this much or I just need to put out this much because that's going to be rejuvenating.
Yeah, I think it is also kind of listening to like each person kind of checking in with themselves. And I think we talked about that the last two as well. What I find really helpful working with folks is to use like a rating scale, like 0 to 10, like 0, like you have no energy whatsoever. Like we shouldn't even be talking on the phone. You need to go have a nap. And that's what's more helpful to you than therapy. Or 10, like I'm feeling great right now. I have tons of energy and I do want to do that high intensity workout or, you know, and that there's different spots in between there and really kind of meeting yourself where you're at based on that moment, you know, and learning to kind of check in with yourself a little bit more. As someone who lives with chronic illness, I do this throughout the day and I've had to learn how to become good at it. There's a whole theory called like spoon theory. And each day you kind of wake up with a different number of spoons, but when you run out, you're out. So you can't push too hard or you're done. And sometimes for me, I have Crohn's and vasculitis, and it's like a big complex illness. But if I look after myself, I seem to do better. And sometimes I don't. It can flare for unknown reasons. But generally, if I take care of myself and check in frequently, I can kind of ration my spoons so that I can do all the things I enjoy.
Just thinking about that scale before you take it away. Yeah. And just how that scale can change from morning to night.
Oh, I check in multiple times through my day.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's okay to feel, but then, but to be able to try to get back up to the 5 from the 2, right? Like,
well, what's nourishing?
Yeah.
What will help me? Is there anything today? Or am I dragging? And do I just need to rest? What does that look like?
Okay.
And for me, running my business, it's like setting myself up for my lower typical days. So obviously I can't predict a flare. I can't set myself up just for like my worst days. But for like things are going okay, but I'm having a low energy day, how much work can I do? And just kind of planning for that rather than planning for my best days, right? Like on my best day, I can see 12 people, right? But on a day where I'm like dragging, I don't want to see more than say 4. So that's where I set my calendar. That's tying back in with the boundaries and stuff. And how that kind of checking in and taking care of can look different based on what you're dealing with. So
and again, in the role as a trainer, we can read some body language and we can try to take a casual look and see what's going on. And you can see a gait impairment. Oh, that person's shoulder this way, perhaps, or everything's a perhaps, and nothing's.
You can check it out.
I don't know. Just kind of check it out. And one of the questions we always struggle to have answered by our students actually is, "How are you today?" And asking that in a way that isn't either presumptive because you think they're kind of not so good, or not self-serving because you want it to be asked about you as well. So like, how are you doing today? What can we do? What do you want to do? And again, having that student or participant as a willing participant invested in, I'm checking in on how I feel right now, how I feel after I do that next exercise, and those spaces in between. And then you can start it at a 0. I need to go to bed. Let's lay on the floor, put your legs up a wall. And then if you feel like rambunctious by the end, let's capitalize on that. Or let's just vibe with that and leave feeling a little elevated in regards to either mood or just general betterment or wellness again. So checking in is tough to do as an individual, and that's a role we try to advocate for as a trainer as well. How's your body? Take care. Yep.
Yeah, it's good.
Good.
Oh, I was just and how you treat, there's just an interesting point here. What would it look like if you treated your body with the same loving care
you would treat a newborn?
And oftentimes you'll have thoughts that come into your mind. I think I can say we all think this. And I often try to catch myself and say, would I ever say that thought out loud to a friend of mine? No. So why am I saying it to myself?
Yeah.
So those sorts of conversations. And then with that, one thing that somebody once a saying somebody once said to us was, don't should all over yourself. And that just made so much, I should go for a run.
Right.
Do you want to? I should do this. I should. It's what feels good. What do you want to do? Not should.
I think with both of the work we do with folks, a lot of times they're coming in because they feel like they should come in. So for me, especially when I'm working, say, with teenagers, it's coming, okay, so you feel like you should be here. Your teachers or your parents or whoever told you should be here. How can I work with you for what you want? You know, how can we work this together, collaborate?
Because then you'll come back and you'll also make progress out of it.
And it'll be your work.
And it'll be yours.
Yeah.
Should is a funny word if you say it a lot.
Should.
Yeah. I even just changed it with could. I could.
Yeah. You could.
I could do this.
Yeah.
I could do that.
Yep.
And it's just less pressure.
Yeah. And again, I think the could statement is a little bit more up to you because you identified either that you like it or there is a risk or a reward or a cost trade-off on that, but you're willing to accept that versus, again, the should statement, which maybe from the patriarchy or, you know, from outside sources that are more placing those pressures. But getting back to what Lauren said about would I ever, you know, those thoughts that go through our mind, would I ever tell someone else that? And that was an interesting exercise in the book again. I think it was Amelia at that point where they were organizing a group session. And the challenge was, okay, so as Ian, you need to pick out another person in the room who's your height, your weight, and just go tell them, like, you look great, right? Kind of celebrating that hotness or that's cool. And then what indirectly you're doing is reinforcing that those slight imperfections or those points that you would be particular about yourself, you get to say that's okay because that person does look great. And again, just making sure that the conversation you're having with yourself is, you know, along the lines of the conversations that you'd like to have with other people as well. So I thought that was an interesting parallel.
Yeah, and I like that. And that how you talk to yourself, right? But they don't go too, sometimes it can feel like too much, like I could never get there. So like the body positivity movement, I love it. And I think for a lot of folks, it's like, yeah, but, and so they talk about neutrality, like body neutrality, like just being okay and saying, yeah, I could change this thing or I could work towards that. And I'm going to respect my body. What does that look like?
Yeah. I come up with all these little tidbits. And one of them is training is trying. Training is trying. And what does that mean? I have two kind of versions of that. Training is trying in the sense it's very hard. It's a trying pursuit. There will be failures, there will be successes, there's ups and downs. It's going to test and try you in hopefully safe and appropriate ways. And the other half of that is training is just trying. So in the exercise context here, it's trying to go for the 2 kilometer run when you're really comfortable with the 1, but you want to just try it. That's training.
Yeah.
But training is also then stopping, reflecting, weighing those costs and benefits, and then continuing in a pursuit that you choose. So the training is trying thing came through a little bit here too, because it's okay to be neutral, but it's also okay to want those changes, to not expect, but to believe that change is possible. And from a skill thing, Lauren's runs on her pace on the run is faster. The strength, the skills, the handstands, those things have all gotten better with years of practice of trying and failing. And that's okay to fail in any context, but definitely in that exercise context. What aren't you very good at? And try to come up with a nice way to achieve the goal that you want. But process.
You just kind of were like,
Oh, I rolled my eyes at process because it's such a process.
we all want the quick wins, right? I think that's why certain aspects of, say, fitness industry or weight loss, they promise that you're going to have this thing that's going to be bright and shiny and awesome. And it's a quick win. And we all want the quick win. The idea of like listening to your body and tuning in and only doing what you feel capable of and showing up every day. That is a process. And it's,
And then there's that set point theory that maybe all your efforts are not going to add up to the result that you want because your body has an instinct or that has that memory of we're supposed to be here because we were the happiest, healthiest, fertilest, values that maybe you aren't interested in currently, but that was a healthy place for you. And being the other places on either end of that are maybe not as healthful.
Yeah. Yeah. So they do spend a lot of time kind of diving into that in the Bikini Industrial Complex chapter. And I personally found it really fascinating. Yeah. And I only have 10 minutes.
I know.
So if we've at all created a curiosity in you around any of these kind of terms we've touched on, I do encourage you to check out the book by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. We will be back here next week.
Part 4.
Part 4, talking more about the showing up every day. And what does that look like so that, you can unlock the stress cycle to kind of prevent burnout. And if you're currently in burnout, how can you get out of it? That piece. Yeah.
I was thinking we would finish with a little move.
I love that. Yeah.
I was thinking though, I'm going to change what's on the board, and we're actually just going to do some ankle circles. We paid attention to our head a little bit. We paid attention to our T-spine. Oftentimes our ankles are underrated, undervalued, but we need them because we stand on them. So I'm going to scooch to the edge of my chair. I'm actually going to do a figure 4. Extend one leg out straight, please, if you'd like. Take the other leg, gently lift it, rotate it, and place it on that thigh. And then drag the long leg in so you're in that figure 4 leg shape. Check in with your hips. How do they feel? Your low back. You're trying to stay up pretty tall. I have my ankle bone off of my thigh here, and I'm just going to reach down. Depending on your body and how long you are, you might be a little more hunched over. I want you to take your other hand and just grip your shins. And then this hand gripping the balls of the feet and the toes. Right now your ankle is going to be passive, and I want you to take your hand and just take your ankle through some circles. So you're moving your foot around right now. About 2 in one direction, feeling maybe some cracks, some pops. Oh, it gets stuck over there. And then slowly 2 in the other direction. My stabilizing hand is trying not to let the shin move, but to just move my ankle around. Once you've done about 2 in that direction, you're going to let go with that bottom hand and now place 2 hands on your tib fib or your shin. From here, gently point your foot. We're going to do 2 ankle circles active. So you're going to reach your foot towards the floor and then slowly again, but now you're drawing or actively carving out that ankle circle. As I come around here, try to look at your toes. I'm pretty bad for having elf toes that like to reach around, so I'm trying to keep them in line or a little bit pointed even just to take out those elfiness. We're reaching all the way around. You'll see the bottom of your foot a little bit and you'll get back to that pointed foot. Now can we do the same thing in the other direction? So this time you'll come up towards the ceiling. Maybe you feel some hiccups or some skips in that joint. Can you slow down that area and really reach and slowly come around to that pointed foot? And then with the toes in that pointed leg position, can you dorsiflex or pull the foot towards the shin to end up in that flex foot? And then as much as we want tension there, we want that ankle to relax. So maybe you have to take it off the leg, but can you shake out the ankle and it have tension, but also have that relaxation? Nice. We'll do the same thing on the other side. So we straightened out that leg. We lifted, externally rotate, placed on. This is my slightly tighter hip.
I just noticed that too. I'm like, oh, my thigh was not a huge fan. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it okay to be there, right?
Oh yeah, now it is.
Yeah.
I just had to shake her out of it.
Yeah. And so also recognizing that my body moves in different ways than Ian's body and moves in different ways than yours body. They all have the same joints most of the time, but it can be, it's okay. One hand grips, one hand balls of feet and toes, and slowly articulate in that nice controlled circle here, all the way around. How does this ankle feel compared to the other ankle? Oh, I've sprained this ankle 7 times, so it feels, I'm sorry, I was being a different person. But having those conversations, yeah.
Paying attention.
And then from there, did we switch directions? I'm sorry. Switching directions there, taking your time. And then come back to center, go back to that pointed foot, this time both hands on shins, point foot. Slowly articulate towards the floor. And you're, again, carving out that circle, reaching around to the flex foot. The hardest part for most people is just going slow in this. Oftentimes faster is easier because we can skip the hard parts. To that pointed foot. Now slowly switch directions. We go up towards the ceiling. Oh, no hip hop skipping here. Pulling around, reaching towards the floor, making sure those shin bones don't spin with you as you reach down. So sometimes I kind of pull up on them. Around to that point or ballet foot. And then leading with the ankle, pull the foot back towards the shin. And then gently relax and see same thing. Oftentimes people who have like a more sprained or tender ankle, being loose is actually hard because they're so guarded. Their body has guarded the joint. Be loose.
Tension and relaxation.
All right.
Great.
That felt great.
Good.
Yeah.
Those ankles, don't forget about them.
Great. And you've also mentioned that with wrists too. So that's something maybe
Stay
next week.
tuned.
All right.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight on our Book and Body Club Part 3. My name's Lauren.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Stacy. We'll see you again next week to talk about the last part of the book,
Which is?
part 3, and it's implementing every day or regularly to prevent burnout.
So you have 1 week to read Part 3. Or at least the TRDL.
Two TLDR, Too Long Didn't Read, or audiobook it, or check it out. Brene Brown also did a podcast with them, and she's kind of cool. So check that out on her Unlocking Us on Spotify, I think.
Cool.
Yeah,
Lots of ways to read, listen.
and find out. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks for joining. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.